Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the latest episode of the Writers Podcast. And I have with me a tag team. So I'm going to have to be really on my game today because I have with me Kelly Florence and Meg Hafdahl. I hope I said that right, Meg, last name?
I love how you made it sound. It was very fancy.
Okay. How should it sound?
Well, you know, we usually say Hafdahl, but you kind of gave it like a French-sounding twist, and I liked it.
Very cool. All right. So you are a team that worked together on writing, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, we've written 6 books together.
Okay. Wow. Fantastic.
Yeah. So we're best friends, and we've been best friends for like over 20 years now, I think. And we, you know, are both creative souls, and it just made sense to sort of bring our love of writing and our love of horror together. So our first book was Science of Monsters, and it's kind of, we've been on a roll since then.
Very cool. So I want to get a little background for both of you. So who wants to go first?
Sure, I'll go first.
Okay, so Kelly, why don't you tell us about what got you interested in writing and how you ended up becoming a writer?
So I was in kindergarten, and I already had loved reading and or having stories read to me. But I was in kindergarten, and my dad gave me a copy of Night of the Living Dead on VHS.
Wow.
And that started my love of horror. And then I gravitated towards Stephen King, and I was like, I need to be the next Stephen King. And I think Meg had the same thought when she was probably around the same age. We loved writing about scary things and reading about scary things. And so that just sort of became a hobby. And now, thankfully, it's we get to live our dream and our passion and write about horror for a living. Okay,
cool. So from kindergarten, which is a very early age, did you take any, like, what was your educational background? Did you take courses in writing and things of that nature?
I did. And I majored in theater for my undergrad, and then grad school communicating arts. And so all of that, did some playwriting courses, some creative writing, but all sorts of different types of writing, grant writing even, because, you know, if you're in the arts, you need to write some grants. And so our books are nonfiction, but we also write fictional screenplays, and Meg is also a fiction novelist. So a little bit of every type of writing.
All right. How about you, Meg? How did you get on the path that you're on?
You know, I was very much a book nerd from day one. As a child, like going to the library, that was what I wanted to do. That was my jam. I kind of come from a literature background. That's what I studied in college. And I did creative writing courses as well. But, you know, I gravitated toward horror as well. Like Kelly, I was exposed to like the great horror movies when I was young, and I just really gravitated toward them. And so I sort of started on my path. I did some playwriting, and then I did some fiction writing, short stories, and then that eventually turned into writing novels. So I kind of came at it from a different angle. And then we got into the nonfiction writing, which I have a love for, you know, research and things like that. So it's kind of a great fusing of these two worlds. And I feel like my fiction writing and screenplay writing helps my nonfiction writing, and, you know, vice versa. So it's kind of like all sort of working together. They're all challenging in different ways, but yeah, I love writing basically anything and everything.
Cool. I noticed on your arm there you've got the tattoo, and I saw on your are those so you're the Shining twins? Is that what you were?
Yes.
Cool.
Yeah. So when we stand next to each other, they hold hands.
Yeah.
We have them on the, you know, opposing arms, so yeah, they can.
Yes.
Yeah. So.
Wow, that's hardcore.
Yes, we love horror.
Yeah, it's very cool. And this podcast is actually started as an offshoot of my main podcast, which is the Stephen King podcast. And so when I was reading your bios and that, and I saw all this stuff that you had about Stephen King and that, I was quite excited. And then I saw your tattoo and I go, okay, this is going to be a fun interview.
Yeah.
So why don't you tell us how the two of you met and how you decided to start collaborating on things?
We met because of our mutual love for the X-Files TV show. And I happened to be wearing an X-Files t-shirt, and Meg came up to me and in a store and said, hey, I like your shirt. And I'm like, oh, are you a fan? We exchanged numbers, emails. The rest is history. She came over, I think, a week later. We just realized we had so much in common, our mutual love of Stephen King, all things horror movies. And yeah, it's been 22 years now. Wow.
And so just from that friendship, and I guess you both found out that you had creative careers and or backgrounds, and is that how you decided, hey, we should do something together? Or
yeah, I was starting in my sort of fiction writing career, and Kelly was working in theater and teaching. She's a professor of communication. So she was working in arts and I was working in arts, and then it was kind of like, let's bring that together and we get to work together, which is like pretty awesome. And it made such sense because, a lot of times being artistic, especially writing, can be a very solitary thing.
Right.
So it's nice to have that person to bounce ideas off of, and we have so much fun. We have way too much fun working together. We are laughing so hard. We think we're hilarious. So we have a lot of fun.
Great. Do you have anything to add to that, Kelly?
Yeah, I think it's 5 years ago now. We started a podcast called Horror Rewind, and this is where we realized every week we're talking about our love of old horror movies, and we're getting into the real stories, the real science, psychology, cultural legends that these movies are based on. And we're like, we should probably be writing about this stuff. We're talking about it every week, and that's how our first book came about, The Science of Monsters. We just started exploring all these topics that we were talking about on a weekly basis anyway.
Right. So that's a great segue into your nonfiction books that you've done. The Science Behind series, is that what you called it? Or
yeah, The Science of Horror is sort of what we call the entire series.
Okay.
Yeah, so we started with Science of Monsters, and then our second book was Science of Women in Horror. Obviously, as women, we wanted to highlight, women who have been involved behind and in front of the camera. And we got a lot of good interviews in that one. And our third book was Science of Stephen King. And then we did Science of Serial Killers that just came out last October.
Okay.
And then our next one coming this October is Science of Witchcraft. So we've just been doing lots of research and watching a lot of movies, because we take everything that we do and we sort of go through that prism of a film, because that's kind of our first love, and then from there we go into the science, the history, the philosophy. There's so many different avenues to go down.
Okay. That's an interesting approach, because science and horror are generally at odds with each other. So how do you reconcile that? Because science is basically would disprove a lot of the horrors, or it's kind of pulling the curtain away. Is that what you're aiming for? Or
yeah, definitely not. What we've discovered through our research is that truth is oftentimes scarier than fiction. For example, Freddy Krueger, you think A Nightmare on Elm Street, well, this is just a horror villain that sounds ridiculous, but it's actually based on this real medical condition that was affecting Hmong immigrants that were coming from Laos in the 80s. A large number of them were dying in their sleep, and they thought it was because of a dacha, a sleep demon from their culture. But medical experts concluded that it was a combination of sudden unexplained nocturnal death syndrome and cardiac arrhythmia that was specific to males from this region of the world. And they were, that coupled with this belief of the sleep demon, they were actually dying in their sleep. And so Wes Craven read that article and said, okay, what if I base Freddy Krueger on this actual medical condition that was affecting people, and we could die in our nightmares? And
So
so
I mean, that's real horror.
Yeah.
Yeah. I wasn't
Yeah.
aware of that.
Yeah. So, you know, there are things like that where it's like, you know, we certainly, you know, Kelly and I, because we love horror so much, we're not here to be like, well, you know, this could never happen and we're going to disprove. And obviously, you know, yes, of course, you know, there's not a lot of, you know, research and belief, scientific proof that, you know, a ghost is here or that, you know, we're going to be possessed by the devil or things like that. But there's so much interesting history of people believing that and sort of what humans do to other humans. And there's a lot of things to uncover. So, you know, like with Stephen King books, and in our Stephen King book, we don't really focus on the films as much. We focus more on the actual books.
Oh, okay.
And, you know, it was fun to sort of find out, you know, what inspired Stephen King and what, you know, kind of things inspire everybody. Like Alfred Hitchcock, when he read an article about all these birds that were poisoned by some algae in the water and they were all falling and dying. And they kind of covered this town. And, you know, that coupled with a short story by Daphne du Maurier, and there came, you know, the birds. So there's so many interesting things where science kind of comes in and actually interacts with fiction. And it's fascinating. And we could write 100 more books.
Well, as a big Stephen King fan myself, I have to ask, what was the biggest science thing that you found out about Stephen King? Or the most interesting?
There were so many interesting threads that we pulled in Stephen King stories. I think the most ironic one was we were writing about The Stand, and it literally right then, as we finished up our book and turned it in, it became lockdown for a pandemic, and we talked about pandemics throughout history, and so that became it felt really real at that moment, obviously.
Yeah, that's King's amazing for picking up on things like that. And I had to, it was an extra little bit of a chuckle because they called it COVID-19, which if every King fan knows 19 has a very big special significance. So it was eerie. He's a very good noticer, that's for sure. And I think from the science perspective for King, that the most obvious one to me would be Cell, because that's based on cell phone technology and how it could be used to spread viruses, to rewire the brain and whatnot. So that was an interesting take. But in general, King's work is not really that science-based. It's much more, I think, faith than character-based than anything else. So I'm very interested to read your book about that, because I'd be curious to see what kind of things you guys found out.
Yeah, I mean, it's something we really liked doing too for the Stephen King book was the biography element as well. I really liked sort of learning more about him and kind of seeing the evolution of him as a writer and as, you know, just a man throughout, you know, because we sort of go through, you know, the 70s, the 80s, the 90s, etc., you know, and so that in itself was a fascinating aspect, I think.
Yeah. And the nice thing is that you probably could do a volume 2 in a couple more years, because
we could
written a lot more since then.
Thank you, Stephen King. You're so prolific. And we had so many people be like, why didn't you do this book? Or why didn't you do this short story? And it's like, we couldn't do them all. So yeah, we very much could do another one.
Right. So how many science books do you have now?
We're currently working on our 6th. And like Meg said, our 5th one is coming out this October.
Right. And what was the 6th one again?
We haven't mentioned it yet. It's The Science of Agatha Christie. So another prolific writer. And that's been fun. Also, we're doing a biographical element and looking at her journey and all of her stories. Right.
So out of all the books that you've done so far, what's the most fascinating thing that you found out?
Oh my gosh. There's like so much that it's like, oh my God, you know, I'm trying to think. I was talking about just recently for our Science of Serial Killers book, we got to interview a retired FBI agent, and that was a really cool experience. He had worked in Wisconsin, and so he had interviewed Jeffrey Dahmer. And that was just it's just really cool. I think the interview aspect of it, because we do try to include interviews, and we do in every book. And we talk to so many different types of people. We talk to filmmakers, we talk to doctors, we talk to scientists. So I think for me, I don't know about Kelly, but I think for me, that's like my favorite part.
And what I was going to say is we were able to interview Richard Chismar, who wrote with Stephen King. Yes. Yep. And one of the most fascinating things we discovered through his interview is how they write as partners. And they basically, one of them writes and then sends it to the other person, and then they write and send it back. And it's collaborative, but it's not in the same way that Meg and I write. And so it's just fascinating to learn other authors' processes and how they work together.
Absolutely. And that's one of the joys for me of doing these writer podcasts, because everybody's different. Like there's not one size fits all for writers, for sure. So you mentioned Richard's process with Stephen King. What is your process as a team?
So when we're writing our fiction stuff or screenplays, we like to write together in the same room, because it's that energy and we can feed off each other. During the pandemic now, we've had to do some sort of Zoom or FaceTime meetings, which
Zoom.
Yeah, which it still works, but we really like being in a room together. For our nonfiction, we write separately, but then are in constant contact to make sure that we're not doubling up on topics, and that we're clear in exactly where we're going.
Okay. And generally, how long does it take you to finish a book from the first idea to the final draft?
You know, for the science books, because both of us are working on it, and you know, it's, I would say probably about, what do you say, Kelly? Like
6 months,
10 months. I was gonna say six to 8 months, something like that. Yeah. Now when I'm writing my fiction novels, it takes me longer. But when I have Kelly, then it's, you know, it's a team, and then we can do it faster.
Right. And then you're accountable to somebody else too, right?
Exactly.
Very good. So what about fiction? You just mentioned that. Do you write fiction together at all, or do you work separately, or do you do both?
So I write, I have 3 short story collections out. I have 3 novels out. I'm working on my next novel with my agent. And then Kelly and I do screenplay writing together. So, you know, and those, we actually have some nonfiction, but mostly it's fiction. And so that's the fiction that we like to do together, which I think we both bring like elements. Like I bring sort of the literature background, and she brings that great theater background, that visual background. So I think we're a good team that way.
Okay. And do you have anything to add to that?
I was going to say, we haven't written a fiction short story or book together. And I think, as we were talking to Richard Chismar, I think that would be so difficult, but you know, maybe we'll have to try it sometime, Meg.
I know. I'm like, wow, that seems very hard to me. And we were asking Richard Chismar, like, first of all, you're collaborating on a novel, and you're doing it with Stephen King. That has to be, even though they're like really good friends, we're like, that has to be intimidating. Like and yeah, I mean, he said yes, but this idea of like kind of like writing and then like sort of tag team, or like you write and then you send it. Maybe Kelly and I should do it as an experiment. I think it could be fun.
Yeah, for sure. So you're working on your Agatha Christie series, or science, and your serial killer one is coming out this year. That one must have been, like, for that one, I can see there's a lot of science there. So that one, you must have really been able to, like you said, you talked to an FBI agent in that, but there's a lot of documentation as well. And there's a lot of documentaries just on Netflix about serial killers. So you must have been just swamped with material. How did you pick which ones you wanted to talk about?
Yeah, we narrowed it down. I guess there ended up being 30, I think, right, Meg?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah, 30 serial killers. And just, we figured out how to categorize them. And what we wanted to do is not necessarily talk about the most obvious things that everybody knows and everybody's seen on Dateline. we were trying to find interesting cases. Like, for example, there's still an unsolved case of a serial killer in the country of Finland, and they have never been found. They murdered some teens when they were out camping next to Lake Bodom in the 60s. And still to this day, that serial killer hasn't been caught. And so we wanted to shine a light on lesser known cases. And and Meg, maybe you can talk about the Trail of or the highway.
Yeah. So the Highway of Tears, it's a place in British Columbia, Canada, where a lot of not homeless, but what's the word I'm trying to think of?
Street people?
No, hitchhiking.
Okay.
People who are hitchhiking, women specifically, who are hitchhiking, or young girls, young teenagers, where a lot of them have gone missing, and some of them have been found and others haven't, but there actually seems to be a network of possibly more than one serial killer operating in that area, because it's such a rural, vulnerable, where there's a vulnerable population. And so we get into that, but every chapter we go, like I said, through the lens of a film. So like Kelly mentioned, the Finnish case, there's a Finnish film called Lake Bodom. And this one I talked about, I think it's called Wolf River. It's something like that. My brain's like, wait. But so that was kind of a way for us to sort of frame it as, here's what you're seeing fictionally, and then here's what's happening, in reality. And then as far as choosing, Lizzie Borden, for example, is like a topic, and she's not a serial killer. So there are killers in here that aren't technically serial killers that we talk about, but she's a case that just has always fascinated me from childhood. So I was like, well, I'm doing that. We're doing that. So any, things like that, where it's like, we know that we just particularly like and have affection for the story or interest, we make sure to include, because the more we're excited about it, the more fun it's going to be to read. Right.
Do you include illustrations, photos, things of that nature as well?
Yeah, we do. Every chapter has photos, and whether it be real photos of the things that we're talking about, or science illustrations. And so they're all fun books to pick up and flip through. The other nice thing is, because it's nonfiction and every chapter is about a different movie or TV show, you can pick it up and read one or skip around, and it's maybe I shouldn't say before bed reading, because sometimes people get freaked out before bed.
Right. So these books, once you're done writing them and that, do you have a publisher that looks after it, or do you self-publish these, or how do you go about that?
Yeah, so these books are nonfiction books, are published by Skyhorse. Which is distributed by Simon & Schuster. So we've been able to, really, they're out there in every, Barnes & Noble. They're really distributed widely, which is really nice. So we've been able to sort of reach a lot of people that, my fiction, for example, is published by a small indie press, Texas-based. And so their reach isn't quite as wide. I love them. I love working with them, but it's been nice to sort of learn about authorship through the indie process, as well as through what is more traditionally a bigger publisher. So it's been kind of an interesting learning curve.
Yeah, that seems to be par for the course for most writers today. They always talk about not putting your eggs in one basket, and being available through multiple sources, multiple platforms, and things like that. Do you guys ever look at Kickstarter sort of projects at all, or?
We personally haven't done anything through there, but we definitely support other creatives with their projects, and it's always fun to see what people are doing and the stories that they're coming up with.
Yeah, well, you're probably aware of the Brandon Sanderson's recent Kickstarter. That was like $40 million. Like, that's just unbelievable.
Yeah, well, maybe we need to start one, Kelly.
Yeah. Of course, that wasn't an overnight story for there. That's 15 years of cultivating a fan base, and it's paid off for him with big dividends for sure. So You've got this science series going, and you've mentioned that you're doing Agatha Christie, which seems like you're wandering a little bit out of the horror. Oh, no, I realize she does murder mysteries, but is that just because you're both big fans of hers, or how did you pick her?
Yeah, we are both big fans of hers. Also, people really, our Stephen King book really resonated with people. And so we thought, you know, who is another author who also is very popular? And Agatha Christie, yes, she's not straight horror, but you know, we're really excited to highlight, you know, a female author, and you know, it's an ability for me and Kelly, an opportunity for us to sort of bring in some people who maybe our horror scares them a little bit. And, you know, because there are a lot of people who like the murder mystery, but they're not quite ready for, you know, Stephen King. So I think, you know, we're hoping that maybe we'll kind of widen our audience and bring in some new readers.
Cool.
Yeah, we feel like it's a stepping stone into our world. So we are welcoming people. I actually had two people tell me the other day they're too scared to read any of our other books, but they're going to read Agatha Christie. And I said, okay, after you read this, then go back. I promise you'll be fine.
Right. Well, I have a couple of suggestions for other books. I don't know what you're thinking of. I think you could do one for Shirley Jackson.
Oh, yeah.
And
I've got this is my Shirley Jackson tattoo. You can't see it very well, but it's my cup of stars. I agree. Shirley Jackson, let's go. Yes.
And I'd love to see a Mike Flanagan book too, because he's done so many great series like Haunting of Hill House, Bly Manor, and Midnight Mass. Of course, the Doctor Sleep, which was a fantastic sequel to The Shining. So I just had to throw those out there. Don't feel obligated.
No, that's, you know, we're gonna, when we do them, we're going to give you a shout out and say thank you. It was your idea.
Okay, there you go. That's fantastic. I think that's pretty well all the questions I had. I'll just give. Actually, I have to ask Kelly, because you're in the theater. I see that you've done a Carrie musical. Is that the same one that was in the news a couple of years ago, or was this an original?
Oh, it was the same play that got put back up off Broadway, I think. But it is such a beloved musical, and I know a lot of people, you know, think, how could that possibly be good? But it was amazing. We had an amazing cast, and there's a quick change of a dress, so we didn't have actual blood on stage, but you know, when the finale happens. But it was what a fun show. Yeah.
Did you produce it, direct it, or were you starring in it, or did you do everything?
Well, yeah, Meg and I were we were producers on it, and then I also stage managed it. So ran rehearsals and was up there actually running lights and sound too. So yeah, a little bit of everything.
Kelly does it all. She's being very modest. She basically ran that show. Yeah, pretty much.
So Kelly, are you the organizer out of the pair then?
How can you tell?
You know, it's funny. It's almost like you have some psychic ability. Well, I tend to be the organizer, but Meg is very organized in her own way.
In my own way. I mean,
her own special creative way.
I'm here as comic relief, and Kelly
well, it's very. I can tell that you obviously are a good team, because you play off of each other very well. So as I was just saying earlier, that's pretty well everything I had. I'll just give each of you an opportunity to mention something that hasn't come up in the course of the interview that you would like to talk about right now. So feel free to talk about whatever you'd like to do.
Sure. So Kelly did mention our podcast, Horror Rewind. People can listen to that anywhere and everywhere that they listen to podcasts. We talk horror. And we are just excited for the upcoming release of The Science of Witchcraft. Anything else, Kelly? You've got a film festival coming up.
Yeah, I was able to curate a horror film block for the Duluth. It's in Duluth, Minnesota, but it's the North by North International Film Festival, and that's coming up in a couple of weeks. And so I think it's nice to support independent and small films and realize maybe one of those people is the next Mike Flanagan and we don't know it yet. So
yeah,
you know, support local filmmakers. Also follow us on any of our social media and you'll be able to see where we are for upcoming book tour.
Okay, very cool. I'll put all the links to your sites on the show notes for this. And I think you mentioned your books are available in all the big stores, Barnes & Noble, Amazon, on ebook as well.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. And our science books are audio as well.
Oh, wow. That's and who narrates them?
Oh, a whole bunch of different people that are way more talented at it than us.
Well, you're both so creative. I thought maybe you both took a shot at it because.
Oh yeah, well maybe someday.
Yeah, because the audio market is quite a big market for some writers nowadays. It's maybe even more than half their sales, which I found rather fascinating. But
yeah, so many people have told us they like to listen on their commute or when they're working out, and it's just, you know, it's a good way to multitask. Yeah,
for sure. Yeah, and it's weird because it kind of brings back the you know, the old radio show dramas in a way. So I'm not in a situation where I listen to audiobooks that much, but the couple that I have listened to have been fantastic. I always recommend them, especially the Stephen King reading Bag of Bones. So I just think because he's, you know, he knows the characters better than anybody, and he's got the main accent to go with it. So it's and there's some incidental music because one of the characters has a sort of a music background in the story, and they actually play some stuff like that, jazzy stuff and that. So it's pretty cool. Yeah, if you've never heard it, and if you can find it, it's a real rarity. But nowadays, it's the original audiobook of The Dark Tower Gunslinger was read by Stephen King as well before they handed it off to professionals. But I enjoy listening to him talk. So yeah. Okay, well, I want to thank you both for coming on, and this is my first shot at a video podcast. So I hope this is going to turn out good. It seems to be okay, and I will let you both know when it's up. And it might take me a little while to edit it in a shape that I'm happy with, but I want to thank you both for your patience, and I look forward to talking to you again, and I wish you all the best success with your future projects.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having us. It was great.
Great. Okay, take care. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
And scene.